Hello. I did not think that I would be doing a vlog on this topic, but here we are. So today I'm going to talk about the Queen, and I'm going to share some perspectives that I've been observing, I guess you could say around maybe three main, if you want to put things into boxes, for the purpose of language and expression, groups of people. I'm going to talk about what some may call as the inverted royalists, the truthers, and the original peoples, Indigenous / original peoples. So personally, myself, I've lived in a Commonwealth monarchy countries all my life, in the sense of my permanent residency has always been in Commonwealth countries. I have travelled to countries that have not been part of the Commonwealth. However, some of them may have still experienced a lot of colonisation, whether that be through the Commonwealth or through other royalist European countries. And majority of those that I guess I could say I engage with in my immediate environment, those that I guess I would consider friends, throughout most of my life have sort of had a perspective of we're not really sure if there is much of an importance that our nations remain within a monarchy rule, within a Commonwealth rule. We sometimes have struggled to see that importance in our day-to-day lives, if I can put it that way. Other than the pictures and the symbols, obviously, that we engage with when we're paying for something with our monetary system. It's physical in the sense of cash. There's not much else that really we would sense would change if we were to remove ourselves from that rule. Obviously, there would be a change in the sense of our legal system and our government departments, etc., etc. But the purpose of this is not really for me to go into that. So the first group that I want to talk about is the original peoples, the Indigenous peoples, those that have really suffered from the colonisation that obviously occurred through the monarchy. Now, obviously, when I'm talking about the Queen, I'm talking about not just her as a person, but obviously what she represents to these people. So here, while I'm residing in the nation of Amaru, aka Australia, they will talk about and they will share about there's whole generations of original peoples here that call themselves the stolen generation, where they were literally pulled out of their family homes and their family dynamics and either put into a sort of foster care, adoption care facilities, and then, or maybe not always, but then given to other families that were not of their culture. And that was happening up to very recently. It's only really stopped within certain states of Australia not that long ago. The youngest people that I know that have been direct children of that have been probably, well, some could say it actually still goes on to a certain extent, but when it wasn't going on in a massive way, they, some of these people I know that are as young as maybe 40. Just to give you an idea of how recently that was still going on a mass level. As I was saying, it still does sort of occur. There was obviously a lot of genocide that occurred when there was a lot of colonisation occurring, when especially at the start of that process, and of course a lot of land grabbing, I'm also a New Zealand citizen. So again, there was a whole lot of land grabbing going on there. And, there's a lot that I could talk about in regards to the Treaty of Waitangi. If you know what that is, you'll know what I'm referring to. If you don't, I'll do a quick little run over of that. So that was a treaty, supposedly, that was conducted with all of the iwi. Iwi, I-W-I, is a name for like communities. So we might call them tribes. In Australia, they might call them nations. That were residing in New Zealand, Aotearoa, at the time of the start of the colonisation. And some of them did sign it, some of them did not sign it, but there may have been forging of signatures, and there were still many that did not sign it. So it wasn't a consecutive, everyone agrees. But also, to add to that, there was two translations of the document. So there was an English version, and there was what some might call the Te Reo Māori version, and they translated to different things. So the Māori people were convinced that, they were told that the purpose of signing this treaty was so that the white people, the Pākehā people, would be governed and be provided with rules and regulations about how they would be conducting themselves on the lands of Aotearoa. That was what they were told, the main purpose of this treaty, so that the Māori people can continue with their laws and their practices and the way that they've been living their life, and not have to worry and concern themselves about the way in which the Pākehā, the white people, were conducting themselves while being here in New Zealand. And that's not all that it stated. So land ownership in places like Australia and New Zealand, with the peoples that were here when the English and other European colonisers arrived, it was not a concept that they used. To describe their concept would be more to say it was land custodianship. It was to not necessarily own the land, but to look after it. It was something that was to be cared and to live in a certain level of reciprocity with it. And the way in which they did that in Australia was slightly different to how they did that in New Zealand. And that's a whole other topic. But with the English and the other colonisers, European colonisers, land ownership was something that the Commonwealth very much stood for and very much wanted to be imposed upon these lands, because they could see that if they owned the land, if they owned the resources, then they could control and make a lot of money from doing so. And so the English translation of the treaty was actually more along the lines of that the Māori people would actually be giving up their rights of their lands and their land custodianship to the Queen, basically. Not the Queen that we know her now, but the Queen that was in the monarchy at the time. So yeah, there's a whole lot more I could say to that, and there's a whole lot more history in her story in regards to how that all went down in Australia and the land custodianship, land ownership that happened there. I'm just sharing the New Zealand one because that's something that most people are aware of in New Zealand, and it's something that obviously I studied my law degree in New Zealand, so I learnt a lot of those stories quite in depth to a certain extent there. Okay, so yes, so obviously a lot of these people have their own perspective on how they see the monarchy, the Commonwealth, and the Queen and what she represents to them. And I don't need to explain further in that. I don't feel like it is something that I can fully give a voice to. It it's not necessarily my ancestral history, her story in regards to being an original person or an indigenous person or a native person of these lands. However, I can only speak really for my own ancestral lines in regards to my European ancestry, and obviously me being of that ancestry, I very much feel sadness around what has happened. There is a level of guilt, but there's also a feeling of really willing to see what I can do to try and bring back the original LORE, the original law of how we can move forward. And so that's what I wanted to say in regards to that group of people. Again, this is overgeneralization. You can be sitting in all three of these categories or none of them, or, how dare you try and put me in a box, and that's fine. So the next one I'll talk about is what they might call themselves the truthers, and they very much question a lot of things. They never take any mainstream media on its face value, ever. There's obviously various levels of degrees within that. Some people do see that there is elements of truth and things for us to learn within mainstream media and mainstream information and mainstream societal ideas, and there's others at the other end of the spectrum that just wish to reject all of that, and that's okay. They often probably sit what some would call within the fourth dimension, 4D perspective. A lot of them obviously questioning the actual date of the Queen's passing. They often talk a lot about obviously the extra dimensional, ultra-dimensional beings and their relation to the monarchy and the Queen, and they often refer to some of them as being reptilians. I'm unsure whether some of these terms that I am using is going to flag this video. Again, I'm just sharing perspectives. I'm not telling you what you have to believe and what you don't have to believe. And they often see the Queen as a representation of a lot of control and a lot of third dimensional societal ways of living that have been imposed upon us through coercion and etc. etc. So yes, there's a lot of them that have been very active in putting down people out there that are talking about the Queen in any other kind of perspective, and they can be rather judgmental with those that are not aware of the things that they are aware of, or don't hold the perspective that they're aware of, or that may even sit within fifth dimensional or beyond, multi-dimensional perspectives on the Queen. And if you're not talking about her like she's a reptile and all of these sort of things, then you're not awake and aware and all of that. Just because someone talks about the Queen in another perspective does not necessarily mean they're not aware of the other things that may be present with what she represents, especially if you don't normally sit within a third dimensional mindset anyway. So yes, and then the last one I want to talk about is what I might call is the inverted royalists. They might prefer to call themselves royalists, and that's okay. And so a lot of them, I guess maybe I should explain what I mean by inverted. So inverted meaning these are the royals that we have been coerced into believing that they are our royal bloods, and that we should not question any other royal bloods that may actually reside. And there's often this sort of feeling of it being imposed upon us. You can look at obviously a lot of symbolism, a lot of colours, pictures, and all of that, and how all of that has been inverted. I won't go too much into that. And yeah, so a lot of these people have been experiencing obviously a lot of grief. You know, the Queen, whether they are grieving for what they think is her solely, or they might be grieving for the representation of what she means to them, what the whole royal family and the monarchy represents to them and to society. You know, it is very much a representation or potential representation of, you know, a dying time frame, timeline. You know, we're having to let go of what no longer serves us. You know, and she was a human to an extent. You know, there's a lot that could be said about people speaking ill of the dead so soon after their death. And I don't want to get into a game of judgment about judging people that are judging dead people. But, you know, we also have to remember that she is a person. Yes, there wasn't really a lot that we knew too much about her in regards to her personal life. And that was really much a sign of the generation of which she lived in. You know, we now live in a generation where people are posting pictures about like what they eat in a day and complaining about XYZ, or, you know, there's a lot more personal information that gets shared these days, and not just necessarily with people that we're close with. You know, there's a lot of information that we share that all sorts of people can know about, whether you have purposely posted it out for the public to see, or whether people are just very good at putting in technology into our technology to see what we're doing and what we're up to. You know, people hacking and all of that sort of stuff. So yeah, whereas obviously you will see with the inverted royalist bloodline, the more younger generations who you get to sort of know about the silly dramas and things in which they might engage themselves in, and there's a lot more, you sort of know more about things about them. Like you might actually know what their favourite colour is or what their favourite food is. You know, but the Queen, we kind of knew that she really liked her corgis, and you might know what her favourite horse is, and, you know, there's not really that much that was shared. You know, but yeah, so going back to them grieving, it is important for them to grieve, and, you know, whether, like I said, they're grieving just for her death or for something bigger and what it actually represents, and whether they're aware of what it is that their grief is coming from, it's not that important, but it is important that that grief be felt and then be let go. Because when it's not is when, I guess, obviously illness and disease can present itself not only just within the individual human, but like within society at large, which then also impacts our greater environment as well. So yeah, I guess the question now is how much longer will this family have the attention of the public, of certain people? Obviously, if you're living in a country like, I don't know, Saudi Arabia, Thailand, Mozambique, I don't know, like you're probably not really going to hear too much about this kind of royal family. You know, they might have their own royal families that they obviously have their attention to, but in places like Australia, New Zealand, you know, Canada, United Kingdom, throughout a lot of Europe, there is still quite a large focus on that family. What are they doing? You know, so it'd be interesting to see how long the mainstream media tries to continue to impose that importance upon us, and whether we continue to allow that to happen. So yeah, that's like some questions that I really have. You know, how much longer will we continue to give power to continue to feed that? Yeah, like I'm not saying that we should not be celebrating royal blood. I just question whether in a place like Australia, whether we should actually be getting connected with the royal bloods of maybe the original peoples here, because they have their own royal bloodlines. Same in New Zealand, like they still do have their royal bloodlines as well, but maybe could that be incorporated further into our systems? Could they be more involved? I personally, myself, actually have royal blood, but not in the sense of the inverted royal family. I have Scottish Gypsy royal blood. And so, yeah, me sharing this is also to let you know that, like, royalty is not just what this, British family is. It goes beyond that, and we have different ancestral lines and different royal bloodlines in which we find probably important to us. If we are willing and curious enough to go out and discover, remember them, get connected with them. So, yeah, that's all that I wanted to share in regards to this topic. Like I said at the start, I did not think I was going to do a video on this topic, but here we are. Welcome to leave your comments and questions in the comments section down below, and I will see you in the next vlog.